In 1911, socialite Evelyn Walsh McLean slipped a 45.52-carat blue diamond around her neck at a Washington Society function and laughed when a guest reminded her of the stone's infamous reputation. She had heard the stories. Every new owner had. The Hope diamond had allegedly helped finance a revolution, passed through the hands of executed royalty, and left a trail of financial ruin and violent death stretching back through 2 centuries of European aristocracy. Evelyn was amused by all of it. She was one of the wealthiest women in America, the owner of the Washington Post, and she had just paid a fortune precisely because she liked the idea of owning something the world found frightening. Within a decade, her son Vincent was struck and killed by a car. Her daughter Evelyn committed suicide at 25. Her husband Edward, once a newspaper magnate, died in a psychiatric institution. Evelyn herself died deeply in debt in 1947. The diamond was sold to settle her estate. If the Hope diamond is merely a stone, one is left wondering why its story reads, without exception, like a ledger of human suffering. Few moments in the history of archaeology carry more documented ominousness than the morning of November 4, 1922, when Howard Carter's team broke the sealed doorway of Tutankhamun's burial chamber in the Valley of the Kings. A local newspaper, Al-Ahram, published a warning that same day, citing ancient Egyptian tradition. Those who disturb the eternal rest of a pharaoh invite destruction upon themselves. Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financier, dismissed such warnings as the superstitions of a pre-scientific culture. He died in Cairo 5 months later, reportedly from an infected mosquito bite that inexplicably coincided with a power outage across the entire city at the moment of his death. His dog, back in England, allegedly howled once and dropped dead at the Sami hour. Over the following decade, more than a dozen individuals with documented connection to the tomb's opening died under circumstances that ranged from mundane to profoundly strange. Egyptologist Herbert Winlock catalogued the deaths in 1934 and concluded that the pattern was, at minimum, statistically extraordinary. The Egyptian government has never issued an official position on the curse. Perhaps that silence is itself a kind of answer. The estate sale was held in Portland, Oregon in 2001, and most of the items went unremarkably. Then the auctioneer reached a small wooden wine cabinet, and the atmosphere shifted. The seller, a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, pressed a handwritten note into the buyer's hand. The cabinet was a dybbuk box, she explained, a vessel used in Kabbalistic tradition to trap a malicious spirit. It was not to be opened under any circumstances. The buyer, Kevin Manis, opened it that same evening. What followed was, depending on one's tolerance for coincidence, either a remarkable run of misfortune or something more deliberate. Manis began experiencing nightmares of a shrieking hag. His mother suffered a stroke the day he gifted the cabinet to her. Every subsequent owner reported variations of the same dream, the same physical symptoms: hair loss, welts on the skin, the persistent smell of cat urine and jasmine in rooms where neither was present. The box eventually found its way to a museum in Las Vegas, where it remains sealed inside a specially constructed outer case. The museum's owner, Zach Bagans, reportedly refuses to be in the same room with it after dark. Sometime in 1702, a man named Thomas Busby was dragged from his chair at the Sandhills Inn in North Yorkshire on his way to the gallows, convicted of murdering his father-in-law. According to accounts preserved in local records, he demanded a final drink at his favored seat, and as constables pulled him toward the door, he turned and declared with absolute certainty that death would come to anyone who sat in his place. The chair remained at the inn. The first recorded victim was a chimney sweep who sat in it on a dare in the late 1800s and was found dead the following morning, his neck broken in a fall. Accounts multiplied through the 20th century. A Royal Air Force pilot who sat in the chair before a flight that killed him. 2 delivery drivers who died in a road accident hours after arguing over who would take the chair. A Royal Air Force officer dead within days. By 1978, the innkeeper, deeply unnerved, donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum, which mounted it to the ceiling specifically to prevent anyone sitting in it. It has been there ever since. The official interpretation is that the deaths represent confirmation bias. The museum keeps it mounted to the ceiling anyway. During a stretch of 1985 that fire investigators in northern England would later describe as deeply peculiar, a pattern emerged from the wreckage of house fires across Yorkshire and beyond. Brigade Officer Peter Hall was among the first to note it publicly. In home after home, reduct, ed to ash, A mass-produced reproduction print depicting a dark-eyed crying child by artist Giovanni Bragolin remained entirely unscorched. The Sun newspaper ran the story in September of that year, inviting readers to send in their own crying boy prints. Thousands arrived. A bonfire was organized. Witnesses reported that the prints did not burn easily, an observation later attributed by skeptics to a flame-retardant varnish applied during mass production. Yet what the retardant theory fails to address is why the fires occurred with such disproportionate frequency in homes that contained the prints. Fire investigators noted the correlation without explanation. Giovanni Bragolin, the Italian painter, reportedly refused to speak about the series of works before his death. The identity of the crying child model has never been confirmed. Colonel W. Ferris carried the violet gemstone back to England from India following the chaos of the 1857 mutiny, reportedly taken from the looted Temple of Indra near Kanpur during the British military's brutal suppression campaign. The Delhi purple sapphire, as it came to be called, was a rich amethyst, mislabeled as a sapphire, perhaps deliberately, and within years of its arrival in England, Ferris had descended into financial collapse and failing health. He passed it to a friend, who requested it be returned immediately, calling it malevolent and inexplicable. It changed hands through London's intellectual circles until Edward Heron Allen, a scientist and scholar of considerable reputation, eventually received it. He locked it in 7 boxes, bound them with charms, and in 1904 deposited the whole assembly with the Natural History Museum of London under strict instructions. It was not to be opened for 33 years after his death. The accompanying note described the stone as cursed, thrice accursed, and responsible for misery and degradation to all who had worn or carried it. The Natural History Museum holds it still. It is not on public display. William Stoneham painted The Hands Resist Him in 1972, a canvas depicting a pale boy standing before a glass door through which dozens of disembodied hands pressed from the darkness behind him. The painting sold, changed hands, and eventually disappeared into a California estate. When it resurfaced on eBay in February 2000, the listing included an extraordinary disclaimer. The figures in the painting moved at night. Those who had viewed even the digital image had reported nausea and an overwhelming sensation of dread. The seller recommended that children and pregnant women not view it. Over 30,000 people visited the listing within 24 hours. The painting eventually sold for over $1,000 to paranormal investigator Zach Bagans, who also acquired the Dybbuk box, a coincidence that certain researchers find noteworthy. Stoneham himself, when interviewed, stated calmly that he believed the painting acted as a threshold between the waking world and something else. He did not specify what that something else was. He seemed to feel the question required no further elaboration. Near Napoli, in 1988, construction workers unearthed a kainat, rived silver vase believed to date from the 15th century, likely a betrothal gift for a young noblewoman who, according to the note found with it, died before the wedding. The note, transcribed by the workers and later passed to journalists, read simply, "Beware, this vase brings death." The Italian government catalogued it, and then something unusual occurred. The catalog entry was reportedly suppressed. The vase passed to a pharmacist who died of apparent heart failure within a month. The second owner, a surgeon, died shortly afterward under circumstances his family found inconsistent with his medical history. A third and fourth owner followed in rapid succession, each dying within roughly a year of acquisition. Investigators in the Napoli region eventually petitioned for the vase to be locked away, and according to researchers who tracked the object, it was sealed in a local government vault sometime in the early 1990s. No official statement was ever released. The vault's precise location is not a matter of public record. The discovery was reported as a triumph. In September 1991, a 5,300-year-old mummified man was recovered from a melting glacier on the Austrian-Italian border, extraordinarily preserved, his tools and clothing intact. Scientists named him Ötzi and immediately began a global research effort. What no press release mentioned, at least not initially, was that the 2 hikers who found him were followed by misfortune. Helmut Simon died in a blizzard in the same mountains in 2004, and the man who led his rescue died of a heart attack hours after the recovery. The forensic examiner who performed Ötzi's first autopsy died in a car accident shortly after. A documentary filmmaker covering the discovery died of a brain tumor. The list extends to 7 individuals with documented connections to the Iceman's recovery and study, each dying before reaching old age. Scientists have argued for statistical coincidence. Others note that Ötzi showed evidence of a violent death, an arrowhead lodged in his shoulder, and speculate, with measured seriousness, about what spiritual protections a murdered man of ritual significance might have carried with him into the ice. By the 1960s, the cemetery staff at Druid Ridge Cemetery in Pikesville, Maryland had informally and unanimously agreed to avoid the section containing the grave of General Felix Agnes after nightfall. The reason was a bronze statue commissioned in 1905, a shrouded, kneeling female mourner known to locals as Black Aggie, crafted in a style so eerily lifelike that the cemetery's own caretakers found her unsettling in daylight. The urban legends surrounding her accumulated over decades. Her eyes glowed red at midnight. Pregnant women who passed her miscarried. The dead from nearby graves gathered at her feet in the small hours. Fraternity initiations were organized around the tradition of sitting in her lap through the night, a ritual that reportedly ended when one initiate was found dead of a heart attack at her base with no documented cardiac history. The Agnes family eventually requested she be removed. She was donated to the Smithsonian, and in 1967, where she was quietly placed in storage rather than displayed. She remains in storage today, cataloged but inaccessible to the public. The Smithsonian's official position is that she is simply a work of art awaiting appropriate exhibition. No exhibition has been scheduled. Across centuries and continents, these objects share something that resists clean explanation. They arrive with warnings attached, the warnings are ignored, and what follows conforms to a pattern with an unnerving consistency. Mainstream scholarship frames these narratives as confirmation bias, the human tendency to remember tragedies that follow acquisition and forget the years that pass without incident. That explanation is reasonable. It may even be correct. And yet the documented deaths surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb, catalogued by a skeptic, number over a dozen. The Busby chair hangs from a ceiling in a museum because the cumulative death toll made keeping it accessible untenable. The Delhi purple sapphire was sealed inside 7 boxes by a man of scientific reputation who explicitly begged future generations not to remove it from its containment. These are not folk tales whispered across centuries of oral tradition. They are written records, museum acquisitions, documented estate sales, coroner's reports. What is genuinely difficult to resolve is not whether curses are real in some metaphysical sense, but why these specific objects appear again and again at the edges of documented tragedy, generation after generation. Perhaps what these relics preserve is not supernatural energy, but something stranger and more disturbing. The accumulated weight of human suffering encoded into objects and passed forward to anyone willing to carry it. And perhaps the most unsettling thought of all is how many of us, given the chance, would have made the same choices as every owner before us. Certain, in that first confident moment of possession, that we would be the exception,